The Shadows of Anu, Echoes of Oppression, a journey through myth and history, exploring the Anunnaki's legacy of oppression and its parallels in human tyranny. In the distant past of Mesopotamia, a civilization thrived amidst the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates. This was the realm of the Sumerians, where gods walked among men. Among these gods were the Anunnaki, celestial beings often revered as the architects of civilization. However, beneath their divine façade lurked a darker narrative one rarely told, a tale of subjugation, exploitation, and the ruthless acquisition of power. The arrival of the Anunnaki. According to countless ancient texts, the Anunnaki came to Earth not just as creators but as beings seeking to harvest its resources, particularly gold. Legend spoke of their interstellar origins, coming from the planet Nibiru, where their own world suffered due to a lack of resources. Driven by desperation, these advanced beings sought to mine gold from Earth's abundant lands. But the labor required for such an enterprise was immense. To fulfill their needs, the Anunnaki devised a plan. They would create a new labor force. Drawing from the primal qualities of humanity, they genetically modified early hominids, intertwining their DNA with their own, giving rise to what would be known as Homo sapiens. In one stroke, they transformed the volatile, untamed creatures of the earth into a subservient race, ripe for exploitation. Subjugation and control. As their civilizations advanced, the Anunnaki established a strict hierarchy. They erected vast cities adorned with towering ziggurats, but beneath their magnificence lay the suffering of the enslaved souls who toiled endlessly in the mines and fields. The Anunnaki ruled with an iron fist, much like the iron grip of totalitarian regimes that would rise thousands of years later. The Anunnaki's methods of control echoed throughout history, resonating with oppressive regimes that sought to dominate entire populations. Their ruling classes employed brutal tactics to maintain their superiority and ensure compliance among the masses. Elaborate systems of propaganda labeled the common people as lesser beings, justifying their exploitation under the guise of divine mandate. Temples dedicated to the Anunnaki dotted the landscape, where priests controlled the narrative and encouraged worship through fear and intimidation. The parallels of oppression. The oppression driven by the Anunnaki bears chilling similarities to authoritarian regimes in more recent human history. For example, like the Nazis of 20th century Germany, the Anunnaki justified their domination through the concept of inherent superiority. They viewed themselves as supreme beings, ordained by their celestial origins and their creation, humanity, as no more than a tool to serve their needs. The hierarchies they imposed were rigid and brutal, with the gods at the pinnacle and the enslaved humans occupying the lowest rung. The Nazi regime, too, relied on a stark hierarchy designed to devalue and dehumanize entire groups of people. Through propaganda, the Nazis framed their reign as a fulfillment of destiny and superiority, casting their victims, particularly Jews, Roma, Slavs, and others, as subhuman entities meant to be subjugated or eliminated. Similarly, the Anunnaki fostered a system of divine propaganda, with priests and elite humans acting as intermediaries, reinforcing the narrative of the Anunnaki's godlike authority. Just as the Nazis exploited their victims in concentration camps and industries for resources, so too did the Anunnaki engineer humanity to become their workforce. The gold mines of Mesopotamia and Africa served as the ancient equivalent of labor camps, where humans toiled ceaselessly under harsh conditions. The suffering, degradation, and exploitation mirror the inhumanity of forced labor systems throughout history. Even the methods of punishment and control draw parallels. The Anunnaki were said to wield devastatingly advanced technology capable of wiping out entire populations that defied their will, a recurring threat in ancient myths. Likewise, the Nazis used the threat and reality of mechanized violence on an industrial scale to quell dissent and terrorize their victims. The psychological tools of fear, hierarchy, and propaganda bridge the millennia between these two oppressive systems. The system of slavery. The Anunnaki system of slavery began with their genetic experiments and continued into every aspect of the lives of those they subjugated. Humans were bred for obedience, with characteristics that aligned with servitude emphasized in the creation of their species. Ancient stories like the Atrahasis epic recount how humans were designed to alleviate the Anunnaki's workload, taking over exhausting tasks such as mining, agriculture, and construction. From their very inception, humans were programmed to be laborers, creatures whose sole purpose was to serve the will of their creators. In the gold mines of what is now southern Africa, enslaved humans worked under brutal conditions. These mines, claimed by many modern alternative historians to be linked with evidence of ancient mining activity, were thought to be the epicenters of Anunnaki exploitation. Workers toiled ceaselessly in darkness, extracting precious metals from the earth while receiving little sustenance or rest. Those who disobeyed, rebelled, or failed to meet the quotas set by their overseers were subjected to horrific punishments. Legends speak of the Anunnaki wielding advanced weapons capable of inducing mass suffering, reinforcing their dominance and quelling any attempts at resistance. Beyond their physical bondage, humans were also chained mentally and spiritually. The Anunnaki recognized that controlling the mind was just as important as controlling the body. Temples established across Mesopotamia became centers not just of worship but of indoctrination. Priests convinced the population that servitude to the Anunnaki was their divine purpose, a sacred duty they owed to their creators. Through rituals and religious dogma, humans were conditioned to believe that disobedience would result in divine retribution, both in this life and the afterlife. The system also employed a hierarchy among humans, creating a class of human elites to oversee the laborers. These elites were often the priests or rulers who claimed to have direct communication or special relationships with the Anunnaki. By granting these individuals privileges and relative autonomy, the Anunnaki created a divide-and-conquer dynamic. Human overseers often became complicit in the exploitation of their own kind, perpetuating the system while believing they were serving the gods and securing their own status. The parallels between this system and the hierarchies of slavery seen throughout human history, including those implemented by regimes like Nazi Germany, are striking. In Nazi labor and concentration camps, certain prisoners were elevated to positions of authority, such as the infamous capos, who oversaw and disciplined fellow prisoners under threat of punishment themselves. This created divisions within the oppressed, fracturing solidarity and ensuring the system's longevity. Like the Nazis, who utilized slave labor not just for manual work but also for resource extraction to fuel their war machine, the Anunnaki viewed their human creations purely as tools for their agenda. The lives of the enslaved were expendable. What mattered was the accumulation of wealth and resources. When the cycle of enslavement became unsustainable or rebellion loomed, the Anunnaki, like the Nazis, turned to violent suppression. The deluge, known to us from the biblical flood story, may have been a moment when the Anunnaki sought to reset their system by wiping out large swaths of the human population, according to some interpretations of ancient texts. Despite their advanced understanding of science and technology, the Anunnaki were devoid of empathy for their creations. They saw humans as little more than machines, tools designed to fulfill a purpose and discarded when that purpose was served. This dehumanizing perspective is another disturbing similarity to systems of slavery and oppression throughout recorded history. Whether in the ancient cities of Mesopotamia under the rule of celestial overlords or the factories and death camps of the 20th century, the systematic reduction of individuals to mere commodities represents the gravest failure of those in power. The Hidden Legacy. The story of the Anunnaki's enslavement of humanity is both allegory and warning. Though humanity eventually outgrew this ancient system of bondage, the legacy of oppression established by the Anunnaki continues to echo throughout human history. From the empires of antiquity to the horrors of modern dictatorships, the seeds of exploitation, hierarchy, and dehumanization planted by these gods persist. The Nazis and their slave labor camps offer one of the most harrowing examples of humanity recreating the systems once taught by these supposed gods. The ideology of inherent superiority, the systemic control of marginalized groups, and the ruthless pursuit of resources at any human cost, all these are mirrored in the Anunnaki's treatment of their creations. As we look back on the myths of the Anunnaki and the history of human oppression, it becomes clear that the greatest lesson to be learned lies not in the stories themselves, but in our ability to recognize and reject these systems of inequality and exploitation when they appear in our own societies. Whether wielded by celestial beings or human regimes, the shadow of domination is a universal threat that must be overcome. In the end, the lasting question humanity must wrestle with is this: do we carry forward the systems of our oppressors, or do we rise above them? The story of the Anunnaki and their parallels to more recent oppressors reminds us that the choice is ours, and the consequences of our decision will shape the future of our species. This article was converted for free by the courtesy of AudioRead. If you enjoy the service, please consider upgrading your plan to listen to up to 500,000 words per article. Simply go to audioread.com/ad and you'll see the upgrade option. Your support helps us keep making the service better. Thank you.